What's up, everybody? Hope you guys having a great day today. You're watching On Air with Nick Driver podcast. This is the Nick Driver live stream, live cast. Today, Memorial Day, May 27th, 2024. And for Memorial Day today, figured we would check out this video from the military channel on YouTube. You guys head over, give them a subscribe, like, and you guys also check me out on YouTube. I do daily content. It's Nick Driver on YouTube, daily content, all kinds of stuff, politics, basketball, everything, man, everything under the sun we talk about. Try to have a good time over here. Yeah, man. So let's get into this video. I came across this and I watched a little bit of it, and I figured I would save it and watch this with you guys because I thought it was pretty crazy. Pretty crazy possibility here, but hey, let's check it out. You guys let me know in the comments, what are you thinking about this? This is hypothetically the USA versus the world. USA versus the world. Who wins, man? All right, let's check it out.
A superpower can be defined as a state with the ability to project power or exert influence on a global scale, usually in more than one region at a time. The United States has been the world's sole superpower since the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991, holding an unrivaled degree of economic and military dominance around the globe. Even today, with the rise of China, the US still remains by far the most powerful country, still far outstripping competitors in national power. It still has 3 times China's wealth and 5 times its military capabilities. And that's not to mention its enormous advantages in geography, demographics, and more. All things considered, it doesn't seem likely that the US is losing its status as global hegemon anytime soon. But hypothetically, what would happen if America found itself in a conflict against the entire rest of the world? Would the country still have the power to achieve victory, or would it be worn down and defeated? Today, we'll take a close.
This is a pretty crazy, concept. I'm not gonna lie to you guys. If you guys are watching this today, you're hanging out with me, let me know in the comments. This is the United States versus the world. Who would possibly pull out the victory here? I can't wait to see what it just sounds like Godzilla versus everybody. That's what I'm saying, man.
To look at these questions with a USA versus the world wargame. First, it goes without saying that such a scenario is extremely unlikely, if not downright impossible, during our lifetimes. Because of its diplomatic and economic ties around the world, as well as its huge arsenal of nuclear weapons, the US has almost entirely removed the possibility of real war with Europe and many other countries. But playing out the remote possibility still shows us a lot about US power and how it might look in the coming years. For the purpose of this video, we'll exclude nuclear weapons and assume that such a conflict would break out after a period of heightened global tensions rather than as a surprise attack. So who would really matter? The biggest challenges to the US in terms of actual military capability would certainly be China. Western European nations would be a close second, as they are wealthy and have stockpiles of advanced weapons and technology. While Russia, once considered to be America's main military challenger, its invasion of Ukraine has made clear that the country is something of a paper tiger, especially if its nuclear stockpile is out of the equation. India is another potential player, with the world's largest population and substantial military hardware. Together, China, Russia, India, and Europe account for the majority of the world's military spending outside of the US. In our hypothetical, let's say these countries all align against the US, with the rest of the world primarily contributing materiel or financial support. While this is extremely simplified, the fact of the matter is that most countries do not have the resources to project power beyond their borders or immediate region, making an attack on the US impossible. So let's say war breaks out. The first major difficulty with a global offensive against the US would be geographic. Surrounded by water on 2 sides, and Mexico and Canada to the north and south, any physical attack against the US would face major challenges. First, it would mean mounting either an enormous amphibious assault from one of the coasts or attempting to invade via land. But the deserts in the southwest and the Great Lakes in the Midwest insulate the country's major population centers from a potential invasion staged from Canada and Mexico. An invasion from outside North America would require massive fronts and long supply chains across the Pacific or Atlantic Oceans, leading to a dramatic reduction of overall power projection.
Just looking at this kind of concept here, we technically, as Americans, we kind of live on not an island. You guys get what I'm saying, but seems like it would be pretty hard, according to this military channel here, for them to invade us from like a naval type of situation where you would bring in, different countries bringing in their ships from different parts of the countries. And we've seen recently the president of Iran, where they can't even find a helicopter that's in their own area to protect someone that is that high up the food chain. So how could you invade a military stronghold like America if majority of the world doesn't have a battalion or a naval battalion that actually is strong enough to pull something like this off? So let's keep it going.
Military expert Dylan Lurk has noted that even the largest amphibious assault in history on either the West Coast or the East Coast would be too insignificant to acquire an effective beachhead. If every foreign power managed to coordinate such a massive operation and do so while remaining undetected under the enormous reach and power of the American intelligence apparatus, it would still have issues building up a force of any significant size before being pushed back into the sea. In addition, the strategic Hawaiian island chain acts as a gateway to the US mainland for attacks from the Pacific and is protected by a significant military presence. Similarly, military installations in Alaska provide protection against any invasion from along the Arctic or Northwest.
Right.
An attack from Mexico would probably be more feasible due to the Great Lakes blocking much of the Canadian border. But California and Texas have the largest concentration of defense industries and military bases in the country, thus providing an effective deterrent from any attack. With the southwestern desert spanning the two regions, the Southwest is also home to multiple heavily armed military bases, such as the White Sands Missile Range in New Mexico or NORAD headquarters in Colorado. An attack launched from Canada on the Midwest or the West would be limited to light infantry and would likely fail to take over population centers or other important strategic points, since there is mostly rural farmland and unpopulated national parks along the border, along with air bases located hundreds of miles south. Dr. Beckley makes this point as well, stating that the United States is a natural economic hub and military fortress. It's packed with resources and has more economic arteries like navigable waterways and ports than the rest of the world combined. And even if the US military was unable to stop an invasion, the huge diversity of terrain would also provide US military personnel or militias with the ability to conduct guerrilla warfare. The US is also by far the most heavily armed civilian population in the world, with a staggering 120 guns for every 100 people.
That would be one of my, just mentioning, when it comes to if a country decided to invade us. This is a hypothetical, clearly what if situation. Clearly a what if situation here, but we have, gun rights here in America, and especially a lot of people in the South, and I would also guess a lot of people in rural areas in the North as well, and also people in the North, they protect themselves as well with handguns as well. So I would think launching a invasion into America, it would literally take the whole world, man. This is really eye-opening, but I want to see what happens here. This is definitely an interesting video to me.
This means that even if a coalition of other countries was able to actually get troops into the US, it would end up facing an incredibly well-armed and pissed-off insurgency.
Right.
On the other hand, over the past 80 years, the US has developed a worldwide infrastructure of military bases, supply lines, and the world's largest air and naval transport fleets. This contains hundreds of ships and aircraft.
Yeah, exactly. On top of the idea, that you've got to deal with skilled, trained Marines, Army, Navy, Air Force. On top of that, you got to deal with a lot of the population that are just Americans that have guns because they hunt, that have guns because they like target practice, that have guns because they're patriotic people. I mean, yeah, man, this seems like a pretty bad idea.
More than the entire fleet of most countries. The lack of global mobility would be an enormous issue for any coalition facing the US. In the weeks before the sort of global conflict in our hypothetical, the US would most likely pull its forces out of the most vulnerable, non-American bases in Europe, Asia, and the Pacific, concentrating its resources in places where the US exercises greater territorial control to act as staging areas. Some areas would be considered too important to abandon, especially those supporting the military's supply chain, US oil assets, and key territorial choke points. One of the first battlefields in any conflict between the US and the rest of the world would be the Middle East. Here, one major aim of the DoD, as carried out by US Central Command, would be to secure critical US oil refineries and distribution centers, as well as gain control of the sea lanes used for transporting oil out of the region. As of 2022, 80.4% of the world's oil reserves are located in countries belonging to the international oil cartel OPEC, and 67.1% of OPEC reserves are in the Middle East. Similarly, over 60% of the world's oil passes through shipping lanes in the Arabian Sea alone. While the US has reduced its presence in the region in recent years, a global conflict would almost certainly cause a reorientation. Possessing the world's 12th largest oil reserves means that the US could theoretically go self-sufficient in wartime, but control of some Middle Eastern reserves would make guaranteeing its supply much easier. Similarly, it would allow the US to deny oil to much of the rest of the world and undermine the coalition's economies and military production. Europe, which would represent the US's most significant adversary, receives a significant amount of its crude oil and natural gas from the Middle East. This means that US military control of the region would harm Europe's ability to sustain a war effort for any extended period of time. China would face a similar issue, as over half of all its oil comes from the Middle East, making the region among one of the most likely fronts in a global war with the US. At the start of the conflict, the US would first strike at oil-related facilities across the Middle East, using carrier-based strike aircraft plus medium and long-range ballistic missiles. US power projection means that even without bases in Afghanistan, the military could easily hit targets anywhere from the Mediterranean to the Strait of Hormuz. While regional powers could offer some resistance, none of them have anywhere close to the manpower or firepower needed to stop the US in an all-out war. While Israel, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and several others do have modern fighter jets and other weaponry, even they would not last very long up against the might of the DoD. And because each is an independent country, intelligence and resource sharing among them would also be limited, further reducing the region's ability to stand up to the US in a shooting war. Most of their asset signals would also likely be jammed by America's powerful electronic warfare capabilities, which would disrupt enemy communications, targeting, and guidance systems across the region. The greatest threat to US control of the Middle East in our scenario comes from ground-based air defenses, as even older systems can shoot unsuspecting fighter jets from the sky.
That's crazy.
However, unlike Russia's recent experience in Ukraine, the US has actually proven that it can effectively destroy another nation's air defense network.
Yeah, if anything that we've learned about the Russian-Ukrainian war is, war is never good, first off. But unfortunately, as human beings, it's something that us as regular people, hey, we have to look at this stuff because evidently leaders in the world and just whatnot cannot keep us a lot of times out of war. So it's good to always examine and look at these different situations. The entire Ukraine war, or the entire Russia versus Ukraine war, we've seen a lot of Russian, as much as Vladimir Putin will flex and say all these different things, and his military personnel. Now you got some very strong-willed Russians there, and I'm not saying nothing about that, but the equipment they have is definitely out of date. They're having a big problem when it comes to dealing with anything that America is sending Ukraine. That's why Ukraine's still in it. So let's keep it going.
As it did during Desert Storm in the 1990s. Today, this might be even easier due to the enormous arsenal of drones the US has access to. Most US losses in the air would likely come from such drones, as well as fourth-generation jets like the F-15, while its more modern F-18s and F-22s could evade all but the best air defense systems. After establishing air superiority, the US would then work to control all choke points into and out of the region, especially the easily blocked Suez Canal, where over 12% of global trade passes through. If it was able to effectively keep regional control over the Middle East and its resources, the US would have a decent shot at winning against the rest of the world. A second major battlefield would be the Pacific, where the US would probably use its fleet to keep China and other East Asian nations contained and stop them from attacking the West Coast. This could mean either a blockade of major trade and supply routes, as well as using islands like Hawaii and Guam to stage its own offensives. It would also utilize its fleet of aircraft carriers heavily in the Asia-Pacific region. As of this video, there are 47 aircraft carriers around the world. The largest 11 of these are all nuclear-powered carriers belonging to the US, which have more than twice the combined total deck space of every other country combined. The Pacific Fleet fields 7 of these, and in a global war could use them to deny access to anything approaching the US mainland. Again, oil would be another top concern, and the US could use its massive navy to gain control of the...
So out of 11 of these aircraft carriers that are existing in the world, correct me if I'm wrong, I could have missed something here, but it looks like America owns 7 of them. Oh, man. We're wilding out over here.
Strait of Malacca, which carries up to 40% of the world's trade every year. While less easily choked off than the Suez Canal, a US blockade of this waterway would also devastate most economies in Asia, giving the US serious economic leverage over China, India, and others. The US would also likely exert its naval power in the South China Sea, which it could use to launch strikes against China, Japan, the Philippines, or any other regional power. Heavy fighting would ensue across the sea and air domains all around the South China Sea, and could account for the heaviest US casualties in any theater of this hypothetical war. Another potential target is Taiwan, where over 90% of the world's advanced microchips are currently fabricated. The US might even need...
Yeah, this is clearly a hypothetical situation because we're actually pretty tight with Taiwan. I'm hoping if anything ever happens over there, as far as under the current administration we're in, under the Biden administration, that they would back at Taiwan, because you have those nanochips over there that could really change the game when it comes to the entire world, power shifting and stuff. And they're right off the mainland of China. China's always looking at them like they're hungry, man. So heart goes out to all the people, Taiwanese people, man.
To seize and try to occupy the island to stop the global coalition from dominating the production of modern electronics. To do so, the US would inevitably have to challenge China as well. Chinese air defenses and ballistic missile capabilities are already powerful alone, and if combined with the assets of every other country in the region, could potentially pose a problem for the US. The naval base on Guam would be especially vulnerable to strikes by ballistic missiles, which could overwhelm its limited air defenses. Even so, the US Navy is so powerful that every country in the East Pacific combined would be occupied with fending it off, and probably could not launch their own strikes on the US mainland. And because the US Navy is larger than those of the next 8 countries combined, it could easily fight in 2 or 3 theaters at once, making simultaneous blockades of Europe, the Middle East, and Asia Pacific a real possibility. Another aspect of a global war would involve submarines. which unsurprisingly the US has more of than almost anyone else. Its fleet contains 53 fast.
It doesn't surprise me. It doesn't surprise me. Now I have heard that America over the past couple years, we've actually slowed production when it comes to submarines, when it comes to actual these battalion type grandioso carriers. Some of you guys have way more information when it comes to the production of these types of crafts. When it comes to the military industrial complex, when it comes to that stuff, you guys let me know. Are we slowing down when it comes to production of military weapons, as far as submarines? Maybe not weapons, but submarines. I don't know. You guys let me know. You guys let me know in the comments, man. We'll get back to the video.
Fast attack submarines, 14 nuclear-capable ballistic missile subs, and 4 guided missile subs. Even without using the world-ending nuclear capabilities of an Ohio-class submarine, this massive fleet would allow the US to launch stealth attacks on enemy naval vessels anywhere in the world, completely undetected. While America would be far more hard-pressed to fend off a global coalition on the ground, at sea, the US stands a much better chance of victory. A third global area of battle would be the Americas, where the US would have the greatest ability to marshal forces and project power. And because Mexico, Canada, and other countries in the region are far less powerful, there is a good chance the US could blockade, control, or destroy the majority of their military and economic resources.
Yeah, this is me thinking like Batman, or me thinking like military-wise. The first thing I would do if I was a person that was in power and we got attacked, the country got attacked by like the whole world. First thing I would do, first off, I know enough about Canada. I've been there a couple times. First off, I'd expand. I'd go ahead and make it to where we're going to take some of this land from you guys, because you ain't going to do nothing, man. And we're going to push a little bit further down into Mexico too. You got to go down there, start wheeling and dealing. This is war, man. So, this is crazy. I would definitely, I don't think I would stay within our borders if I was on some kind of Department of Defense or some sort of the DOD or something like that. I would definitely expand up into Canada until after the war. America is notorious for giving people their land back after they win. We are notorious for being kind in that regard. So let's keep it going.
Canada and Venezuela are both obvious targets because of their status as oil producers. And in a global war, the US would probably aim to shut down or take control of resources in both. Another obvious target is the Panama Canal, which serves as the gateway between the Atlantic and Pacific, and where 40% of all US container shipping flows through. The US controlled the canal from 1903 to 1979, and would try to seize it again during a global war. This would also provide a choke point against the militaries of Central and South America. Chile is another potential target, as the country supplies 28% of the world's copper, critical for the production of modern electronics. Now, obviously, a hypothetical alliance of every other country in the world would have the numerical advantage in overall troops and economic resources. But keep in mind that as of 2022, US military spending was $877 billion, constituting 40% of the global total and more than the next 10 countries combined. Today, this enormous sum still only accounts for about 3% of the country's GDP. In a global war, this percentage would almost certainly increase and could rise to similar levels as World War II, when US military spending accounted for over 40% of national GDP. Today, that would mean somewhere close to $10 trillion a year in military spending from the US alone, nearly 5 times the global total from 2022. Astronomical numbers like these mean that a war of attrition against America would also be likely to fail, as the country could outspend the rest of the world several times over for many years. To gain a true strategic...
Yeah, and I would think something too that they may touch on this later in the video, but I mean, at this point in time, you would have to say, America, we're just not trading with anybody. And whereas a lot of Americans don't realize this because they're living in such a great place, we would have more luxurious items that were not available to us, as opposed to some parts of the world that we actually ship things to. They're more necessities. So yeah, man, this is a very this pretty amazing take on this.
Strategic edge over the US, a global coalition would have to somehow outgun and outspend the Defense Department, while also maintaining their own smaller economies. Another crucial domain in a global conflict with the US would play out in cyberspace. This would probably be the first line of contact between the warring parties, as both sides would attempt to gain information superiority and take each other's systems offline, while US Cyber Command.
Yeah, man, we're getting a crazy thunderstorm over here right now in Zebulon, and my dogs are wigging out right now. They're scared, man. They'll be all right. Are you guys okay? They say, yeah, they're okay. They say, yeah, Nick, keep going. Keep going with the USA versus the world video. All right, guys.
Command would almost certainly be overwhelmed with attacks by many actors at once. America could also use its own highly effective attacks to shut down enemy power grids, computer networks, weapons, electronics, and much, much more. And while it's not as dominant in cyberspace as in the real world, the US still has by far the most capable and best-funded capabilities in the world. In the 2024 fiscal year, US cyber spending will rise to more than $25 billion, and the country continues to top every ranking of national cyber power. However, this domain would also be one of the biggest dangers to the US in a global war,
Right.
as cyber attacks are notoriously difficult to predict and defend against. A well-placed cyber attack by a less powerful nation could still be catastrophic, and would probably be a more serious immediate threat to US citizens than a kinetic strike on the country. However, again, we have no way of knowing how much American cyber spending would increase in a total war,
Right.
or how quickly that would lead to new capabilities. All the elements point to a big conclusion. The US is so powerful that it could take on the rest of the world for weeks or months with no certain winner. Because of this, such a hypothetical conflict would likely become a war of attrition in both the physical and digital worlds. The US would work to starve the world's other major powers of oil, war supplies, and other vital resources, while attempting to preserve its own. A true assault on the US mainland would be extremely difficult because of the country's size, geographic positioning, and incredibly well-armed military and civilian population. Because of the US military's global presence, most of the fighting would likely happen elsewhere, opening theaters of war everywhere from the Middle East to South America and East.
Yeah, we would have to push out. In my opinion, we would have to push out a little bit beyond our country. And when I look at it, I would even say, that part of Mexico where you have that very tiny land strip down there, kind of close to Guam, whatnot. Yeah, we'd have to lock that down. And if we're going against the whole world, man, you got to shut off streams. Man, I would love to. If any of you guys know anybody that is in the military that is like a sergeant, a strategic analyst, anybody like that, I would love to have them on my podcast and talk to them about just things that goes through their minds, because I'm sitting here looking at it, man. And, I'm a big chess player, and they say chess is war. So, nah, it ain't like war like this, but just strategy. So let's get it.
East Asia. In the end, the victor would almost certainly be whichever side could outlast the other, both in terms of military and economic resources. While the scenario of America versus the entire world is obviously an absurd one, it does give us a useful picture of just how powerful the US military really is. With resources greater than those of most individual countries and nearly limitless power projection, even a conventional conflict against the US would be very, very hard to achieve true victory. Add in the country's continued dominance in cyberspace, and it's not all clear whether the rest of the world would actually be able to win such a war. And all of the speculation above excludes the most powerful part of the equation, nuclear weapons.
Right.
Because of the principle of mutually assured destruction,
Right.
no country really wants to use them today. However, it's worth noting that the US has over 1,400 actively deployed nukes. And in any real global conflict, they could be used to give any non-nuclear country a very permanent end. And even
it's very scary, man. It's very scary to think about. We have 1,400 live nukes, and America is really good at doing something and then advancing it, as we're seeing with Russia in the actual Russia starting this war with Ukraine. We see Russia's weapon arsenal has not really been upgraded to the point that we're at in American society with the things that we've just seen on TV, so man, this is crazy.
Even in a very distant hypothetical like the one above, we should remember that the cost of human life in any worldwide conflict would be staggering,
right?
And that even winners in such a war would suffer.
Absolutely.
But what do you think? Would the US really be able to win a war against the rest of the world? Or would the country eventually be overwhelmed? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more military content and analysis.
All right, guys. Yeah, man. That was an awesome video, man. That was an awesome video. I don't know. What do you guys think? Do you think if America actually had if America actually really had to take on the whole world, you guys think with everything we learned from the military channel, you think that's a possibility? Is that a probability? Hey, yo, what's up, George? Hope you're doing good. Hey, what do you think we're going to do about China making a play for Taiwan? George, I think it depends on who is George. I think it depends on who is president when that occurs. What do you think, George? What do you think? You look at situations like this and you say, hey, George brings up a really good idea or a really good thought here. A really good thought. Taiwan technically is under U.S. protection, technically is a U.S. Teammate. We're teammates, right? If China decides to go at them, I'm gonna tell you something with the nanotech stuff that Taiwan has. I know, George, absolutely right. I was actually just saying that when you put that in with the nanotech, nanochip stuff they have. We gotta go, man. It's go time. It's like we would have to go at them because you can't lose that kind of tech. You can't lose that. It don't matter what side of the fence you're on when you're American. Something you have to understand is the idea that you have the ability and you have the right to actually think and do what you want to do in life over here in this country. That's amazing. And the idea that you can go like, okay, well, I don't like this country. Or you could say something like that. Well, guess what? That's okay. You have the right to say that. I'm gonna hit my man George up, man. Hey George, I'm about to hit you up, man. We might have to have a little back and forth live cast right now, man. I'm live casting until about 4:15, 4:30. George, if you want to, you let me know, man. I'll send you something over. We'll chat. We'll talk about some stuff. Hey, man, I hope you guys have a blessed day. You guys, hey, man, my man George right here, real estate guy right here in Zeta, North Carolina. He'll make it happen for you guys, man. And he's a passionate person like me. Good thing about America is we have a whole bunch of people from different walks of life trying to figure this stuff out. Hope you guys have a blessed day. Take care. You watch it on air with Nick Driver, the Nick Driver podcast. Hey, man, thank you guys. You guys have a very blessed Memorial Day. You know, I will say this before I get off here. It's never a happy Memorial Day. Memorial Day is not a happy day, man. It's a day of remembrance. It's a day to remember something very simple. Despite what political side you're on, despite your viewpoint on things, there's a whole bunch of people that are currently fighting for you. And there's also a bunch of people that have fought for you in the past. And you get the freedoms you have because there's some people that's willing to die for that idea. So, you guys, I think it's great to think about this. Think about all the great people that had families, that had their own dreams, that had their things that they loved, and they put those things on hold in order to fight for the bigger picture. Guys, have a blessed day today. You watch it On Air with Nick Driver, the Nick Driver livecast today. Thank you guys for tuning in. I might be jumping back on here with George, man, talking a little bit, man. So you guys be safe. Take care.